What up? I'm B, and welcome to my channel where we talk about all things true crime and current events. Today is another installment of what I like to call the Crafty Crimes series, where we sit down together, you and me, and do a craft, typically crocheting, because that's one of the only things that I am good at, and we talk about something going on in the true crime world. And today's story that we're going to be talking about, I guess it's not a story, it's a true thing, but today's event that we're talking about is something that was actually voted on Instagram. So I don't post to Instagram a ton. You're not going to miss out like that much if you don't follow it, but if you want to have a voice in what we cover on here, what we talk about, sometimes I will put up like polls on Instagram and say, like, would you rather hear about this, or you know how polls work. So if you have any true crime event or serial killer or criminal, whatever that you want me to look into, feel free to leave it in a comment or send it to me on Instagram. Wait for those polls to pop up, whatever. That way you can see what you actually want to see, because I love making topics about what you want, not just what I think you want, and that is super helpful if you give me your input. So enough rambling. Let's get into today's story because it is a doozy. This story is about a man named Martin Markowitz. And Martin was going through a tough time. Taking it back to 1981, he was just having a rough go of things. Both of his parents had passed away, and when they passed away, they left him their very large multi-million-dollar fabric company. So his parents are gone, and now he has this responsibility. And in addition to that, he was dealing with a lawsuit from one of his uncles who was upset that he had gotten 50% of this company. And he was also, recovering from a heartbreak because he was engaged and he asked his fiancée to sign a prenup, but she refused. So they had to end the engagement. So you've got all this going on. There's a ton of stuff happening. Martin was feeling pretty stressed out and he decided to go see a psychiatrist. Now, Martin lived in Manhattan, so, he's wealthy, he's around a lot of big people, big names, stuff like that, and he eventually found someone who was kind of considered a celebrity psychiatrist, and his name was Isaac Hirschkopf. Now, Dr. Hirschkopf was supposed to be like the bee's knees. He was the doctor to a lot of famous people, such as Courtney Love and Gwyneth Paltrow, so that was who he decided to go to. And after his first session, he said that he just felt this sense of relief because it was so nice to be able to talk about everything that was going on in his life. And for once, he didn't feel like he was the person who, it wasn't all on his shoulders. He had somebody to come alongside him and say, hey, a lot's going on, but I'm going to be able to help you. So he really liked that. He got a lot of value and he found some great benefit in going to a psychiatrist, so he started to see Dr. Hirschkopf 3 times a week. So Dr. Hirschkopf, we're going to go ahead and call him Ike. He, is seeing Martin 3 times per week. That's a lot of interaction with that person, but it didn't just stop there, because soon Ike was actually inserting himself into other parts of Martin's life. He was getting into his business and really talking about his finances as well. Eventually, he began coming into Martin's work and making decisions for him and pretending like he, was this big shot. He came in under a fake name so that people, I don't know if it was so that Martin's employees didn't know who he was, and maybe, because he was a celebrity psychiatrist, maybe he thought they would have heard of him, but he came in under a fake name and started making decisions, started trying to, control things, be a puppet master. And eventually he even had patients of his psychiatry practice sending things over to the offices of the fabric company. At one point, about 10 years into their relationship, Martin says that Ike had called him and asked him to go over to the office to pick up a fax that was being sent there. And when Martin went and picked it up, he noticed that it was from Courtney Love. And Martin admits that he said, like, this was a total violation of privacy, but I read it. And he said that Courtney Love was talking about how, just she was having a really tough time with her custody battle for her daughter, Frances. And if you don't know, I mean, this is kind of a side note, she was married to, or in a relationship with Kurt Cobain, and he passed away, and they had a daughter together, and so Courtney, went through a lot of fallout. Anyway, that's irrelevant to the story. The point is, as a psychiatrist, you should not be having your patients send things to a completely unrelated office where literally anybody could see them, but that is what Ike did. Now, back to the 80s, because that's just an example of how blurred some of the lines were, and giving you an idea of how involved Dr. Hirschkopf, Ike, was in Martin's life. About 2 years into their doctor-patient relationship, Ike had managed to convince Marty, I like Marty, that his sister, who also worked for the fabric company, she was just no good. She did not care about Martin. She was only after his money. She was just like a damaging person with bad intentions, and he convinced Martin to write a notarized letter to his sister telling her never to contact him again. And additionally, he gave Martin a pair of scissors and instructed him to cut her out of every single family photo that he had. Isn't that crazy? You know somebody for 39 years, and just from talking to a psychiatrist for 2 years now, all of a sudden a sister who you've never really had any huge fallout with, any huge problem with, she's just after your money and you got to cut her out. Wild. So 2 years after that, in 1984, Ike talked Martin into creating a charitable company a foundation called the Yarn Foundation. And this charitable organization was almost completely funded by Martin. He donated pretty much all of the money to get this started, get this running. And what the foundation did was it just kind of financially supported worthy causes, basically. So it was just a check-writing organization, essentially. And Ike did contribute a little bit of money, but comparatively, it was nowhere near what Martin contributed. And the three people who had control over who the checks were made out to were Martin, obviously, Ike, obviously, and Ike's wife, Becky, which, why? But Martin said that when the foundation was started, throughout the years that they were together, he didn't really, not that he wasn't allowed to choose who got money, but he just had no real part in it. It was all Ike, and it turns out that Ike was writing these checks to organizations that would benefit things that he had an interest in, or he would write them to organizations that he was actually a member of. So you've got this kind of crooked, I guess it's not crooked because they're actually giving money to people who could benefit from a donation, but there were ill intentions in creating this company. And additionally, after the foundation was created, Ike actually, I don't know if he convinced or suggested that Marty do this, but he did it. Martin changed his will that would leave his entire 8-figure fortune to the company, which, sure, not company. I keep saying company, but it's a foundation. It's not a business, but you know what I mean. Anyway, sure, that sounds great. Leave all your money to charity. Oh, you could help so many people, but Ike and Becky, husband and wife team extraordinaire, they're the ones covering, controlling where all the money goes. So, suspicious. So anyway, Martin changes his will, and then a year after that, he adds Ike as signatory to his Swiss bank account, which at the time had over $2.5 million in it. So now he can control the money that Martin contributes to their charitable foundation as well as some of his personal assets. And it was around this time that Ike kind of started controlling more things than just Martin's money. He and his wife Becky essentially took over Martin's Southampton property. He had a big estate, and they basically treated it like it was their own. They put a welcome mat with their own last name on it. In the kitchen, they hung up a sign that said Becky's Kitchen, Becky, who is Ike's wife. And the walls were just completely covered with photos of Ike and Becky and their kids, as well as photos of Ike with various celebrities that he met at different charity events. They even had the house listed in the white pages under Ike's pseudonym, which is Isaac Stevens, and eventually him and Becky started sleeping in the master bedroom, and they pushed Martin off to one of the guest rooms, even though it was his house. They took over everything. They convinced Martin to purchase a connected property, install like a tennis court and a bunch of other stuff, and they basically just treated it like it was their own home. Ike also insisted that Martin change his will once again to leave the Southampton property to his own wife, Becky. Reportedly, he said, quote, "Becky loves the Southampton property, so I think it's only right that you leave it to her." End quote. What do you mean it's only right that he leaves it to her? Like, I'm going to get heated. I'm going to get mad about this all over again, just as mad as I did the first time I was reading about it. But that's such a bold statement to make. Like, it's only right that you leave it to my wife, someone that you're completely unrelated to and would realistically have no claim to this property, but she loves it. Come on, it's only right. Leave the property to her. Sounds legit. So anyway, Martin changes his will, leaves the Southampton estate to Becky, and at the same time, because they had taken over the Southampton property and were using it as their own, Ike started throwing a lot of parties, and at these parties he would invite the neighbors as well as some of his patients, like some of his other psychiatry patients. So that's obviously a violation of doctor-client, like the doctor-patient relationship. You're blurring the boundaries there, and some of the other patients who were at those parties, they each have their own stories of the ways that Ike took advantage of them and some of the things that he did that really had a negative impact on their life, but they have wanted to remain anonymous, so it's a little bit harder to get as many details about them as we have about Martin, because Martin's like full-fledged talking about it now. But so he would have these big parties, lots of people were invited, they were supposedly super fun, super laid back, like having a good time, and Martin was responsible for sending out the invitations. He even went over in person. He may have done this to multiple people, but we do know that Joe Nocera from Bloomberg, he's a reporter, Martin went over to his house and invited him in person to this party, and he said, Isaac Stevens, or this is just me assuming something that he said, like it was along the lines of like, because the reporter, Joe Nocera, said it was a very specific way he was speaking, like he had been rehearsing it, like it was practiced, this person requests your presence at this party, to meet you and blah, blah, blah. Like a little errand boy, he had to go over there and invite them in person. And everybody at these parties, like obviously Marty was there, but everybody thought that he was just the caretaker of the property. They essentially thought that he was an employee, and how could they not? So this whole thing, it went on for years and years and years, just Ike having access to Martin's money, using his property, really just taking advantage of this person, convincing him to, he cut out his sister, and Martin tells us that he created wedges in his other personal relationships and in the relationships that he had with people who worked at the fabric company. because those were like lifetime employees. You know, it was his dad's company before it was his, and he'd known those people for a really long time, but Ike had managed to kind of create a wedge in between them and Marty. Eventually, in 2010, Martin had a hernia operation, and after that happened, when he was in recovery, he said it was a super painful experience. Recovery was not easy. He was in a lot of pain. Ike did not call him, text him, check on him, nothing, not even once. This was when Martin had a real moment of clarity about what had been really going on for the past 30 years. Think about it. This was from 1981 to 2010. And over the course of those 30 years, Ike had essentially pushed away everybody that Martin was close to. He gained control over a lot of parts of his life. He inserted himself into his business. He took over his home, he had done all of these things. He had made himself such a big part of Martin's life, and he knew that Martin had nobody else. And he didn't even bother to check on him once. So Martin was obviously upset. He was super hurt. He started thinking about, really thinking about everything that had been going on for the past 30 years. And he said that once he had this, click in his head, he changed his will immediately. After that, he told Ike and his family to move all of their stuff out of his house in the Hamptons, because, he had two houses. He had the apartment in Manhattan, and he had the house in the Hamptons. And so he told them, go over there, get your stuff. I mean, he was nicer about it, but basically, essentially told them to pack it up and get out of there. And he stopped seeing Ike, because this entire time, he had spent over $3 million getting treatment from Ike as his psychiatrist. So he stopped seeing him, cut off communication, did not have any personal contact with them, just said hey, get your stuff, here's where it's at, blah, 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 all of that. And he eventually called his sister and really made an effort to gain back that relationship, as well as the relationship that he had with her daughters. Because when he wrote her that letter telling her never to contact him again, essentially how it went down is that he sent it to his sister's daughter. And so they were all hurt by it. His sister has a few girls, and none of them had any contact with him for almost 30 years. It seems so crazy when you hear it all told at once that anybody could let their life be taken over like that. You would think, this guy's an intelligent man. He runs a company. He's very successful. He was a little bit stressed. How does that go from being an independent person, controlling your own life, to getting taken advantage of on such a large scale? The power dynamic was very off. Ike had a lot of control and a lot of influence over Martin's life. He was additionally amazing at manipulation, and he would tell Martin things to get him to do what he wanted. So he would basically tear Martin down and make him feel bad about himself, and then come alongside and be like, well, you're horrible, but, he didn't say horrible, but he would say, you're not lovable, you can't handle the truth, you're passive aggressive, you can't handle things on your own. So tear him down, make him feel bad, and then come alongside him and say, well, I can help you, I can handle it. So, this Ike guy is just basically a supervillain. It's creepy. So like I said, in 2010, that was when Martin changed his will and cut Ike out of his life. And he spent the next few years just really trying to get things back on track, trying to rebuild that relationship with his sister, as well as getting his other personal relationships back and getting his business, to be run the way that he wanted it, getting it back on track, regaining the trust of his employees and all that kind of stuff. So he did that for the next 6 years or so. And then in 2016, he did file a complaint with the New York Department of Health. And they keep telling him that they're investigating, that they're working on it, but no criminal charges have been filed against Ike. However, they were supposed to have a hearing in September, which, because Marty was talking about how he was really frustrated because this was in 2016. And so far, nothing's happened. Whenever he calls to get more information on it, nobody will really tell him anything. They just say, like, oh yeah, we're looking into it. But in September, they were supposed to have a hearing that would essentially call Dr. Hirschkopf into chambers, quarters, whatever, wherever they're having this. And they would tell him, like, everything that they had found against him. And this isn't anything for, like, criminal charges, but it's more so going about maintaining his license as a psychiatrist. And so they would tell him everything that had been substantiated, like all of the accusations that they were bringing against him. And at that point, he would be able to rebut them and say, like, no, this is unfounded. Here's my side, whatever. That was allegedly supposed to happen in September, but I have not seen anything about it. I have not heard anything about it. There's been no updates. So we really haven't seen any huge consequences to the misconduct from Ike, but we do know that since the story broke over the summer, he has resigned from his position at New York University Medical School, and we know that he has voluntarily resigned from his position on the board of the fellowship at Auschwitz for the study of professional ethics. So those are two pretty big organizations that he is no longer a part of, but it wasn't because he got kicked off. I think it was just because, you know, the story broke and he was like, oh shoot, I'd rather resign before I'm fired or before they kick me out, you know? That's all the fallout that we've had so far. Dr. Hirschkopf, he's a doctor, he went to medical school, but we call him Ike because he's mean. He will not comment on anything. Anytime a reporter calls him for comment, like getting his side, whatever, he'll say that he can't talk about it because it's a violation of doctor-client confidentiality or doctor-patient confidentiality, which, cool, you're going to uphold that standard, but literally every other standard you're going to throw out the window. So he won't talk, he won't give us his side. He has reportedly just said that everything is untrue, everything being reported about him has no true basis, it's all a lie because people have a vendetta against him. I don't know, I don't buy it. I believe the person who is willing to get up and talk about it. I believe the person who is willing to share their story even though it's embarrassing for them and even though it makes them seem kind of foolish and vulnerable. So I'm on Marty's side, but that's just me. But that is all we have so far for this story. That's all we know. I would love to know what you think of it, or if you have had any similar experience or heard about anybody else having an experience similar to this one. So please leave your thoughts, leave your comments down below because I love reading them. I love hearing what you have to say, and it means a lot when you comment and share stuff like that with me. So please do that. Additionally, I would love it so much if you would like this video or subscribe to my channel. And for those of you who have already subscribed, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of you, and I love being able to sit down and just talk about whatever. It literally means so much, so thank you for that. And with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for watching. And remember to go out there and be the voice of reason in a world full of crazy.